In this video, we're going to go into the basic introduction of Motion 5. Now here we have 5 blank items, and I say blank because here in our project browser, which is the window that opens up by default when you first launch Motion 5, you will see that by default it says blank on the upper left hand side. If you had other templates, then you will see them listed here. Once again, it opens up in blank, and we have 5 different options available to us. Now what we'll have here is a motion project, which is a blank project. When you create something in a blank project, you can go ahead and export that and utilize that in any non-linear editor that you wish to utilize it in. And to the right of that and below, we have Final Cut items that you can create here. So we have Final Cut Effect, Final Cut Generator, Final Cut Transition, and Final Cut Title. These are templates that you can create in Motion, yet when you save them as templates, they will be available to you directly in Final Cut Pro 10 or X. Once again, I'm selecting the Motion project. On the upper right hand side, we have Broadcast HD 720 by default. That is becoming the television standard now. If you wish to change that so you can match your footage, select on there and you select one of these that best matches the footage that you're going to utilize this in or with. If you're going to zoom in into your elements that you create here in your non-linear editor, I strongly recommend you utilize custom and at least double the size of your footage. This way, when you go into your nonlinear program, you can zoom in to your element that you created here and it will not pixelate. Pixelation happens when you overextend an item. So if you zoom into it by more than 110%, it starts to pixelate, meaning that there are jagged edges on your elements. Frame rate should match the footage that you have or the camera settings that you brought in the footage from. If you're using other elements, then try to see what those elements are and then utilize the frame rate that matches those elements. So for example, if you download stock footage and your stock footage is 2997 and you know you're going to create a project at 2997, then you should change this frame rate to 2997. And that's what I will do here. The duration is the duration of the project by default. You can always extend it and shorten it. If you do not want to have to do that later, and you know you're going to make a 20-second spot or 30 seconds or whatever the case may be, you can change it here. That way you know it's already set to that time that you selected. I'm going to leave it at 10 seconds. If I do not wish to see this in time code, I can select here and see it in frames or seconds. I'm going to select on open. A new project opens up. We have our canvas showing. And on the upper left hand side, I see File Browser. Now there are different windows in Motion. You may open up your program and you may have more windows than this open. And I'll go ahead and show those windows. So on the left hand side, we have File Browser. If I wish to show my layers, I will select the F5 key and you will see that will become exposed. And if I wish to see my full timeline, I can select F6 key and you will see the timeline being exposed as well. You may see all of these open by default already when you first launch your program. To turn them off, once again, I can go back to F6, turn it off. F5 will turn that off. If you select an item and you see a heads-up display, select the F7 key, and that will turn that on and off as well. Back to my file browser, I will select on it. I see here all the drives that are connected or available to me. If they are not connected, they will not show here. These may be items that were open previously and the program saw those items and they will stay here. Only when I update, these will disappear or reappear accordingly. Same thing for any networks. If I have any networks available, they will show up here. If not, again, once it updates and it sees that's not available, they will not be there. I'm going to roll back to where it says network here and select on computer. I'm going to go to the next tab, which is library. And here is my library of elements that are available by default in the program. These are stock items that come inside your program. If I select on generators, I will see 3 folders on the right hand side, and then whatever selected, you will see underneath all the elements that belong to that item that's selected. Right now, the all folders is selected, meaning that all items, all generators that belong to this program are being listed. If I would just generators, you will see just the generators are listed. If I want text generators, only the text generators will be listed. Same thing for particle emitters and behaviors. Now select on particle emitters, because particle emitters are usually what you use the most. We will go into other elements in other tutorials. If I were to select the very first particle emitter I have seen here, I will show an afterburner. A preview opens up in the upper left hand side. You'll see the name of it as well. If I had a specific item that I want to find, I can always select on the finder, which is all in the bottom left hand side, and you see it says search. Select on there, and the magnifying glass item will show there, and it says search. I can type in there, and as soon as you start typing, it starts bringing items up by default. Remember to clear that option, because if I were to leave that, let's suppose I put BAR, you see that elements will be constrained to the BAR. So if I were to go to behaviors now, nothing is listed. Many people say, hey, I just lost all my behaviors, or I have no behaviors. You must clear the finder, and I'll go ahead and select the X to clear it, to be able to see all of your elements. As long as there's something here in this finder or this search window, they'll always be searching for that particular selection that you're trying to select there. So always clear your selection so that way all elements are available to you to view. Back to particle emitters, back to my afterburner, which is selected. Again, we have that available here. After the library, we have the inspector. The inspector pertains to whatever you have selected in your canvas or your layers. Underneath that, you'll see properties, behaviors, filters, and object. The object item may change depending on the selected layer that you have in your canvas. Go back to library. I have my afterburner. Once I have my afterburner, I can go ahead and select on there and drag it into my canvas and let go, and it will be in my project now. If I wish to have this centered, I can select on it and start moving it around. You will see these guides show up. Once I see the guides being centered right there, you know that this is centered. If you wish to automatically center it, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So I'm going to select my layer, select on the delete key, and instead here in my library tab, I'm going to select on apply. Once you do that, it automatically brings it into your project and it also centers it for you. Please keep in mind that the item will begin wherever your playhead is at. Which, speaking of the playhead, there is a playhead on the bottom left hand side or on the bottom of our canvas. And right now, since I got rid of my full timeline, I see what's called a mini timeline. And the mini timeline, you will see this blue bar or other color bars depending on what you have selected. And I see the name of the item here. So it says Afterburner. If you were to click and select on this, so I'm left clicking and holding, if I were to drag left and right, you'll see that the timing of my element changes. To play this, I can select the space bar. I can select the play button. And I can go to the very beginning by selecting this far left button. I can select this button to its right. So on the left is go to start, go to end, play from in to out. So here's play from start. The play button again, the record button, and frames left and right. So here's a previous frame and a next frame. So that will go frame by frame. You can also utilize your left and right arrow keys on your keyboard to go frame by frame. If you wish to change, if I look down here, you'll see that my window shows frames. If you wish to change that, select on there and select on show time code, and now this changes to time code. Once again, the space bar or the play button will play my Afterburner element here. So this particle emitter, it has a preset, and if I wish to see the presets, if you don't already see it, is to bring up the heads-up display or the inspector. So if I bring up my heads-up display, I can press the F7 key, and now you will see here. Now by default, the birth rate is 105, the life is 127, the scale is 57, and the emission range is 90. These are the default values. They do not have to stay in that way. And we'll go into that at another session. I can close this. You can also bring up windows by going to the window menu and selecting the items that you wish to see. And here are the keyboard shortcuts. So project pane, F5, where you see your layers. F6, show timing pane, which is F6, which will show your full timeline or timing pane. And F7 again, F7 for your heads-up display. Now, if you need to see whether or not you're seeing an element in real time, or if it's playing in real time, if there's any question about it, look on the upper left-hand side of your canvas. And that will show you whether or not your element is playing in real time or less than real time. Now I am on a laptop, so I may be limited on my real time playback. You'll see here frames per second is at 30 or 29, so it's averaging around 28 to 29 as it plays along. So it may drop or increase according to the usage of your computer. If I wish to press stop, select on your spacebar and it will stop. Once again, always remember that if you were to bring in another element or start another element, it will start wherever your playhead is at. So try to either have the playhead moving or go to the very beginning of your project. Now when I say keep moving, if I were to press play and I were to bring in another element, so I'm going to select in my library, select on analog modulator and drag this in while it's still playing, you will notice that if I have just the analog selected, and I see here in my mini timeline it says analog modulator, that it begins from the very beginning. I'm going to go ahead and select my modulator and press delete. And my playhead is still moving. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. So now I stopped. I still have my analog modulator selected. I'm going to press on apply. Now I will go ahead and move this. And if I were to press play, you will see the modulator and the afterburner playing together. But once it comes around, you'll see that the modulator will not be there. It just appears out of nowhere. And that is because the playhead was stopped at this location here, and that's when I brought in my element. So therefore it starts at this point in time. Now I can always change that. I can always take the analog modulator in the mini timeline and left click on it and drag to the left, therefore making certain that it begins at the very beginning of my project. So if I were to press play here, when it loops back around, it should be visible at the very beginning of the project. And it is. So again, you can change the timing of your element there. This is not changing the speed, it's just changing the location of your element. If you have other elements available to you, I'm going to go ahead and delete these. Again, if you're utilizing something from another program or stock footage, select on your file browser, select on your drive, or double click on your drive, and find your element, or you can go here. If you have your drive selected, go to the folders where you believe it may be at. So in my case, I will select on movies, and I'll select on stock clips or footage, and I can select an item and go ahead and drag it into my project. So if I were to select on this item and drag it into my project, you will see it here. Again, because I had the playhead at another location other than the beginning, you'll see that this is blank. So if I wish to move this to the very beginning, if it's my intention for this to begin at the very start of the project, I'll select on the mini timeline, select on the element, and drag it to the left. And now it will start from the very beginning. And that's how you bring in a video or different elements from other programs into your project. I'll select on it and press delete. And I'll go back to underneath the file browser and the mini player where you see stock video clips. I'll select on there and go to computer to go back to my original selections. So those are the different items that are available to you in your project in Motion 5 and the basic elements of Motion 5. So those are the windows: File Browser, Library, Inspector. And you'll have your layers and your timeline and your heads-up display. Again, you have to have something selected. I'll select on this, and if I were to drag this in here, you will see that the heads-up display becomes populated. The layer is selected, as well as inside your timeline. If it's not at the very beginning, if your playhead is not at the very beginning, it will start at this point in time. If I were to select my playhead and drag back, you'll see it's not available there. So keep all of these things in mind when you first start utilizing the program, as I know that it becomes a little confusing as you start building in the program. Thank you for watching. This is Luis Sierra for Chesapeake Systems.